Hi everyone, welcome to session 2. Really, we're still reeling over that great presentation from Don. Just some really amazing stuff coming down the line. So some really exciting stuff's coming. So I'll keep Gavin busy for the next little while, and I think everybody as well, and some great questions as well. So thanks to everybody for asking such good questions to Don. So I think he was really impressed. So in session 2, we've got Gavin going to kick us off now. I'm going to stop sharing screen, and we're going to talk about FME and the Microsoft product suite as well. So as we had mentioned at the beginning, that Microsoft's just huge, and its adoption has been massive, especially in the last 2 years. So really good to see that. And then we've got Sean and the team here as well, Robert and Andrew, who then will be talking about FME in Northern Ireland Water, helping things flow, and then Ciaran on automating data quality. And then again, we'll have a bit of a break. Apologies that we had into the last one, but it's rare we get Don, so it's always good to have him there. So Gavin, I'm going to stop sharing my screen if you want to bring up your slide deck.
Okay. Yeah, 1 second.
And we still love you, Gavin. You're getting all the love on the chat.
You were.
I was only messing.
Yeah. No, I'd be lost without you.
Did you see my slides there, or have they not come through?
Not yet, Gavin.
No, they're not up. I have your presentation if you want me to take it as a backup.
Yeah, do you want to do it that way?
Yeah, 1 second, and I'll bring it up now. Just 1 sec.
I think the security's blocked it on mine.
Okay.
That's that Apple stuff here.
Yeah, that's the Mac.
Yeah, well,
cool.
I was going to say, I'm excited. That new M1 technology, that's the MacBook justified now, so that's that's going to be really interesting, because those ARM chips are so much more energy efficient. The battery life, and moving that out to the edge computing, I think it's going to open up so many new opportunities and things for different things.
If anybody didn't know already, Gavin is a huge Apple fan. He would literally put an Apple tattoo on his back if he could. He's got every gizmo and gadget that they have. Every time we're talking to him, he's got it. So I'm going to share screen here, and then hopefully it works. And then Gavin, you can just give me the nod whenever you want me to click.
Cool, thank you. So yeah, on the back of the fact we're talking about Apple, we now have to talk about Microsoft.
The enemy.
So yeah, this is going to be a little bit over to the dark side for this one. So what we're going to talk about, though, is Microsoft, obviously how we can use it. Don's presented there's some really exciting new stuff. There's a whole lot of innovation coming. There's some really cool technology out there. Obviously, a lot with the AWS platform. There's a lot of different things. But, a lot of users, most users, are still tied to that Microsoft product suite. So they're heavily embedded with Microsoft. They are one of the big leaders, and their growth has been huge recently. So, they're not somebody going away, and SAFE has a lot of support for them. It's just that because, Microsoft's probably that slightly staid and kind of boring version, I suppose, of software, people don't like to get excited about it. It's not very glamorous and things. It's what you use day to day. So it kind of gets lost a little bit, I think, in the background. But there is a huge amount of capability that we can use and leverage with it. And some of it's incredibly powerful as we go through. And there's a lot of parity with the likes of Amazon as well, as we'll see. So I was going to say, it is that evil empire resurfaces. I think they have been seen, probably, as we say, as being a little bit dull. It was always just, SQL Server and a little bit of Excel. But with the growth of the cloud, that's really exploded. A lot of software as a service platforms have come in. There's so much more now we can do with FME and Microsoft than we could even 5 years ago or even 2 years ago. That growth has been really significant. So I think it really helps bring all of the suite together. So it is popular, much as we'd all like everybody to be running on an Apple device. There's 25 billion Office 365 users. There's 21% growth in 2020. And I think that's really just showing that growth of software as a service. Software as a service as a model has grown. Obviously Office has adopted that, and they are probably that leading one that most people will be familiar with when they're using it. And you can see just how much that has grown over a reasonably short period of time. Looking at 5 years there, and that growth is massive. Over that 5-year period. So that's why, Office 365, the integration with FME these days is becoming a lot more popular as more and more people move over to it.
Absolutely crazy stat. 25, and I've seen Ciaran's face going, 25.8 billion users. How is that possible? But no, it is. It's a phenomenal number when you think of how successful they have been and the adoption globally.
Yeah, and part of that is Azure. Obviously AWS has always led the way. All the exciting kind of companies that came out all probably started out on AWS, But a lot more traditional businesses were Microsoft. They had all of the Microsoft infrastructure. They're slowly moving up to the cloud. So I think as they're moving over, Azure's the natural fit for them because that's what they're used to on-premise. So they're moving over. So Azure's growth there is quite strong. It's actually probably growing a little bit quicker than AWS. So whilst a lot of all the sort of new startups and things have got very excited around the capabilities of AWS, Azure is really catching up. It's a strong competitor, and it's really down probably to Azure and AWS these days when you're looking at cloud vendors. If you're probably over at the Far East, you might look a little bit more at the Alibaba. Google Cloud is there, but I think people are always cautious with Google because they have a habit of dropping stuff very quickly. So from a business perspective, they're obviously a bit more high risk as you run through. So Azure is really important. And obviously that helps with the whole FME and Microsoft suite. So, we've got all the Office 365, there's all of that Azure capability, and FME has really strong support for it, even if it's maybe not stuff that, you'd possibly think about is there or has been quietly snuck in over the years. Jump on one more. And obviously that just gives you an idea of some of the services there. Now, obviously Office 365, you'll be really familiar with. You've heard us talk about all of the reporting, things like generating your Word reports, PowerPoint presentations, obviously good old Excel. That's still one of the most popular formats for being translated within FME. I think it's number 2 or was number 2. It's getting close to overtaking shapefiles as being number 1. But things like SharePoint have come online these days. OneDrive has come through. Teams, as we'll see, has become really, really popular. There's been strong support for SQL even before it became spatial. So obviously, as Microsoft added spatial support back in 2012, that's come in with SQL Server. Now FME supports that. As that's moved up to cloud with Azure, obviously there's support there for those as well. But there's also support for some of the newer things coming in. So we'll come back to the Azure Blob Storage. Those weird little hexagons on the right-hand side there are their message queues that we can connect into and the table support. And at the top there, we've got the cognitive services, which we start to look at all that machine learning capabilities, pulling in image processing. So if you want to find cracks in the road, white lines on the road, being painted on or not, are they degrading? You can start to put that through some of those image processing routines, natural language processing things there as well. So we'll start off having a quick look at some of the connectors, because I think, whilst these are quite straightforward, they're actually the ones that are really, really useful in a lot of day-to-day scenarios. And when we're looking at customers, these are the ones that people tend to actually be wanting to kind of access to data, to publish data with as well. So one of the nice things we can do is we can actually use the file system as a cloud, or use the cloud as the file system. And it's kind of one of FME's little hidden tricks that it's been able to do for a long, long time, but few people really realize it can do it. So in that file system, you can come in and you can point to a web service directly, pull data down. FME will automatically download from the web for you and process that data. So if you've got things like Excel, that's really useful. But we can also use OneDrive and SharePoint there as well, and actually start to use those as part of that file system. So you don't just have to be limited to your desktop. And I think especially these days where everybody is working remote or has been working remote, more people are moving around, more and more data is online. You don't want to have access to the file systems. So we can start to use OneDrive and things as a way of actually accessing that data if you aren't in the office and be able to access your file server. So the example here, you can see we've just got a really simple report. So this one at the moment just reads in an Excel spreadsheet, generates a report, and then basically publishes that to HTML. And this one's looking at TII. So it's taking in some data from TII, looks at where the toll locations are.
Sorry, Gavin, should this be playing? Apologies.
So if you go back a slide, yeah, that should have a video. Is that?
Oh, there we go. Apologies.
So that will come in. You'll see that it's set up at the moment just as a standard Excel document. So, that's really traditional. It's not a particularly complicated workflow. It's purely when I built so I can find out where the toll stations are, because it completely confuses me. I really struggle with the whole toll concept on roads. So we can see we've got, standard file system. We've got the Excel spreadsheet there. We can click on that. We can bring that through, load it, very, very traditionally. But what we'll also be able to do, if this one's still going, there we go, is be able to actually access that in the same way. But if you click on the drop down there, what you'll see on the right hand side is obviously we can go to that view from the web, and then we've got the different options. So in this case, we can browse to OneDrive. I can just click on that OneDrive link, and a bit like you'd see the file system if you actually access OneDrive itself. I can come through and it will show me all the different folders and reports. So this is looking at my IMGS OneDrive. I can go into my reporting data. I'm going to find that spreadsheet, and I can just add that into the workflow, and I can bring that through. So I don't even have to do anything particularly different or complicated. It just works kind of out of the box as is. So it's very, very straightforward. It'll run through, and obviously then it's going to generate me my HTML report. So it's not a particularly exciting one. It's just the different toll booth locations. It confuses me over which ones take card, which ones need cash and things, and where the locations are. So it's just a really quick way you can see how much, how many euros I'm going to need for a car to drive through, for example. We've got the links out there. We've embedded, so I can jump out to the TIA webpage. You can scroll down, see if I need a card for that particular one, or if it'll take cash only and things as you go through. So you can build those up, you can link them through. But what we can do is, if we just jump over to the next video, is one more slide forward, sorry, I think. Thank you. It'll be the same kind of idea, but we can actually use the OneDrive connector. So you've probably heard us talk about these a little bit before. We can do things like we can list data, we can read data through, we can delete, we can upload data. But with the list option, what we can do is actually we can monitor for people uploading data sets to it. So we might have a shared OneDrive folder, for example, that people are putting data into. So we're just using the same kind of approach here to pull down. We can scan that data set. We're going to read it in, but it's going to bring through a whole bunch of information, including the date last modified. So I can just put a simple tester in that says, well, okay, if that date last modified is within the last week, I'm going to see that as an update. And that minus P1W at the end is basically just saying to go back 1 week from the current time now. So it's basically looking back 1 week from the current run point. If that data is within the last week, I'm assuming it's an update. I'm going to load it in. If it's not within the last week, I'm going to send an email to basically say, well, can you please send me the update? You've not posted that new update to the data set that's there as part of that workflow. We can get that data, we can download it using that run transformer, and then we can push it through a similar process we would do. It's the traditional feature reader, we're building that report again, but then obviously I can upload that file as well. So in this case, we're just simply uploading that data set, publishing it back up again, and then we've just got that little hook on the end so we can send that kind of Teams message or whatever we need to do if we want to notify the people that the data's there. It might be that we want to send that as an email, all that kind of usual sort of alerting notification that we can do with FME, we can pull in as part of that process as well. So in this case, we've just sent it as an email. So I've got that link that comes through. And obviously, because it's on OneDrive, it's a shareable link, so I don't have to share the data. So again, if everybody's working remotely, you don't want to be sending vast amounts of data around to different people. I can just send that simple link, and I've got that link to the data set there as part of that process, so I can pull that through as well. And we can do similar things with SharePoint. So OneDrive and SharePoint from a filing system point of view are actually more or less the same kind of thing. But we also have SharePoint lists. They've been there for a long time. They tend to get a little bit forgotten about. They're not as flexible as probably the SharePoint Online connector, but they still have some uses, as we'll see. So with that SharePoint Online connector, we can do all the usual uploads and things as part of that process. So in this one, we've got a really simple workflow. We're reading some data in, we're creating a Word report, and then we're sending this up to SharePoint and basically then having a HTTP caller. What we've done slightly differently with this one, though, is we've built this workspace to run with those survey apps that Don was showing in that first session. So we can use the FME Data Express app as well to actually pull in some of that information when we run this from FME server in the field. So we can do the usual uploads, downloads, list the data set here. In this case, we're going to upload because we want to publish a report that comes in from the field. So the guys don't have to come in, they don't have to create that report anymore. We can make that available straight away as part of this process. So I can come in, I can choose which part of SharePoint I want it to go to. I can find a particular location. So in this case, I can go into our speed sign inspections report folder. We've already got an existing one there. And then when we run this, we'll create a Word document and upload it into SharePoint and then basically send an alert to say somebody's filled it in. So you can see as soon as the guy in the field has completed their basically survey, you can send out a link to somebody internally in the office or wherever they're remotely located to say that report is now available, and they can start to actually review that. So those parameters there are what the mobile app sees. So that's what the mobile user sees when they're coming through. We're doing some really basic styling with basically zero effort on the styling there just to create that. Obviously, then that runs through and publishes it out as we go. So from the user's perspective, we just come in. We can go through all the different server apps we've got deployed. So this one here is our speed signs. We come in, we can put the standard date, time. I can pick up the GPS, the imagery from the existing mapping on the device. You know, all of these drop downs are configured from the FME workflow and that workspace. So I can go through, set all my different parameters. I can set the size. So this could be anything. And it doesn't necessarily have to be submitting data either. One of the really useful things with the Data Express tool is being able to pull data out as well. So I might actually be able to have the reverse of this workflow where I can pull a document from SharePoint and send that out to a mobile user, you know, based on a particular asset code that they're seeing in the field, for example. We can use a camera. I'm going to pretend my mouse looks like a speed sign because, you know, the two are really, really similar. And it was probably raining when I made the video and I didn't want to go outside. So we can run that workspace. That then submits the job up to FME server. That's going to be processed. But what we should get is a Teams message coming through to say that's actually been published and that's gone into that channel. So if I click on that Teams alert, if you just jump forward one slide, this is going to be my next slide, please, if you happen to ever watch any of the UK government presentations. You'll see we've actually got that coming through, but I can click on the open SharePoint folder and we'll see that from the field has been loaded into processed by FME, created the Word report, and then uploaded onto that SharePoint folder there and published as it goes through. And again, I can click on that and open the Word report. So it might be that I don't really care about those messages coming in. I just want to see that the guys in the field are doing stuff, and I can then start to see they're at least filling the reports in. But if one that comes in maybe is a little bit more interesting, I could put a flag on there as well that flags that team alert, or send this to a slightly different Teams channel to say, yep, this one's a bit more significant. Maybe you do want to review this one because we found something when we're in the field that is abnormal and things as we want to run through. So we want to keep a little bit of an eye on that as that part of our process. So obviously we've got that Teams integration. You know, we've spoken about the Teams one before. If you've probably seen any of mine of Garrett's webinars, you know, we'll have mentioned how we've done that in the past. To jump on one slide.
Sorry.
Thank you. But Teams is big. It's 27 or 2.7 billion Teams meetings a day. I think I sit in most of those. And with Garrett, there's 200 million participants in a day. You know, there's nearly 1,000% growth, and you can see obviously through that pandemic just how much that's grown. You know, Teams is huge, so there's no getting away from it. More and more people are embracing it. Everybody's got stuck on front of it probably in the last 18 months. Everybody's sick to death of the thing as we go through. But obviously what we can do with FME, if we just jump for one slide, is we've got the ability obviously to use that Teams connector and the webhook kind of approach that we've used previously. But there's also now a new Microsoft Teams connector. And this one's a little bit smarter. It's a little bit richer, does some quite useful things. So if we jump forward again, what we can do is traditionally would have used a webhook. So within Teams, you can create a webhook on a particular channel. Then you add that into the HTTP caller, and you can send basically that JSON syntax there with your message to that Teams channel, and it processes it through. What we can now do with the new Teams connector is do that in a little bit more of a sophisticated way. You know, we can choose the particular site that we want to go to. We can look at things like the document library. We can also look at things like SharePoint. So we can look at, see what resources are in a particular team that we're pushing files up to and other things, you know, some of the SharePoint assets from that, and some of the files that are stored up there as well. So it's not just about the messages. There's a whole host of other functionality in there that we can use from that single connector. So with this one, we can see we've got that post message to a channel. And we can list the files to the channel. We've got the SharePoint details for this channel. The nice thing as well with this one is when you post from yourself. So, you know, if you create a particular user, you're posting from that user, whereas a webhook is just a bot essentially coming through. So we can choose the team, we can choose the channel I want to send that to, and I can put my message in there. And I've got that web connection, which we'll come back to.
Sorry, Gavin, that was my fault.
I'll skip forward a little bit.
Yeah, that's fine. Just while that's ticking over, I'm glad you mentioned that around the app as well as for downloading data as much as it is for uploading data. I think we'd hear from a lot of customers where someone goes out on the field and then realizes that they forgot a piece of data instead of having to go back to the office. It's something they can just drag down on the device.
Yeah, it's a really useful approach. So with this one, what we've done is taken that same workspace we looked at previously, but I've swapped in the Teams connector. So in this case, we're saying we want to post that message, and then you're building out the message. I've put it and formatted it as some HTML just to make it come through a little bit prettier. So I've got the date, time it was submitted and things there as well. But again, we can put any messaging in there. I'm cheating and I'm just using a creator. I don't need to run the whole workspace for the point of the test. So that's what the creator is basically just allowing me to test a small subset of a particular workflow. So it will test the SharePoint upload, and it's going to obviously test that Teams connector method at the end. And in this case, it's going to fire a message through both approaches. So we'll send one of the richer messages, and we'll send one of the basic ones as well as we come through. So you can see that both are there. So that first bottom one there, you'll see comes from myself, whereas the one above comes from a bot. So we can see it's exactly the same report as we come through. And then we can jump back and we can look at the folders links there as well. So we've got still exactly the same functionality. It's just bringing them from both cases. So you can jump forward. So we've got the two there. So you can see it obviously just comes through the same kind of information. It's just two different ways of presenting it. So if you want to make it a little bit more authoritative, you can send it from a particular individual, we can do that. So the way we do that is, if just trying to jump on one more slide. Oh, there is one little fix though. That transformer, if you do try and use it, does have some slight interesting tweaks. So there's a small, simple fix for it. So basically get you to run that video for me. Thank you very much.
I like the way you call them tweaks, Gavin. Is that what we're calling them? Features, are they?
Yeah, so you'll see here that this doesn't quite give you the drop down for the web service. And it doesn't give you the ability to create a web service. So with a custom transformer in FME, there's a feature where it doesn't really easily carry over the published connections. So if you're sharing between different organizations or different users who don't have them, it's not always easy to do that. So obviously you're not going to have the same connection. So what we just need to do with this one is you can just come in, you can come into the new manage parameters dialog, or the old style one, it doesn't really matter. The new one just looks nicer. And you can actually choose the connection you want to use. And therefore you can make them available, or you can make several available if you've got maybe, like I might myself to use one. I want to send a message from Garrett, or if we have an internal notifications one, I can enable all of those, and I can come in and I can just make that connection available. So if you do use it and you're a little bit stuck with it, that's part of what you need to do just to make it work as it runs through. So it is really simple. It's just a slight quirk of the way FME works. The other small tweak you can make is we can obviously change the message body to include different content types. So if we want to send HTML, for example, we can just set that content type to be HTML, and that will enable us to send HTML messages within there. There's a few other different content types Microsoft can support. So obviously we can add those as well if you want to. And I think, as more and more of these sort of things get identified, we can start to understand what customers want. Obviously, these, transformers extensible, so you can add them in because of the richness of the Microsoft API that it's actually using behind the scenes. So you can jump on if you want. Thank you, Garrett. So it sounds complicated, but it's not particularly hard, that part. The bit that does my head in is the web connections. These are not simple. And that's not down to the way FME implements them. It's down to the fact that they're based on OAuth. OAuth is a horrible authentication protocol, but it's really, really powerful. It's really, really secure. So to get them to work does sometimes take a little bit of playing around, but they can be quite confusing. So if you do struggle with them, do reach out to support and stuff, because we can probably help you through. We've created quite a number of these now as we've run through. So there's things for the SharePoint, the OneDrive connector, the Teams connectors. And if you want to set them up for your organization, you can do this Dynamics 365 if you use that as your CRM. You also need to authorize both desktop and server. So that's the other thing to bear in mind. What works with server generates your security token for that particular instance. That's not the same as the server instance and things as you go through. So if you go into properties or parameters, preferences, depending on which OS you use, you'll see obviously the web connections. You'll see there's all that list of web connections there that you'll be fairly familiar with, probably from your AGOL, your FME connections and things there as part of that process. You've also got managed services. So if you click on managed services, you can jump forward one, what you'll see is a whole list of different capabilities. The Teams one, you'll see there in the middle of the option, and it's basically the Graph API, which is the big sort of API that sits behind 365. So you can add that one for Teams. There's also other ones in there for some of the Azure things. There's a whole host of other ones in there that you can use as well. All those ones are ones that sit on the FME hub. So like some of the custom transformers, these are custom connectors. The standard ones are just at the top of the list. So the AGOL types of the world are at the top. So we'll need to add one of those and then just configure it to make it work with Teams and to make it work with SharePoint and some of the SharePoint List ones. So it's not particularly difficult from an FME perspective. You just need to basically put a client ID, secret, and your tenant ID in, which you can all find from your Microsoft portal. But it might just mean you need to talk to some of your IT people because there's a couple of permissions you have to grant and things around it. So it's a little bit convoluted on the Azure side, getting it set up, though it's actually relatively straightforward if you have the right permissions to do it. So I say, if it's things you want to do, there's a really good help article on the SAFE website to talk you through this one. But if you do bump into any problems, obviously just reach out to support and we can talk you through it. The one thing, though, you do find is that passwords change. If my Office 365 password changes, everything takes me about a day to fix it. I've got 3 different laptops and things I need to change. I've got services I need to change. It's an absolute nightmare. And obviously that happens every 60 or 90 days, whatever your corporate policy is. So, do create a service account for some of these things. It'll stop stuff breaking. Permissions are obviously based on that user as well. So you can control the permissions model for them. And that's where all that grant and scope as well and things as part of that process works through. I need to jump through one more. So SharePoint List, this one's basically just doing something we could do with Power Automate, but it's an update, received, redact, approval, and publishing open data. So if we jump forward to one, the idea with this is what we're doing is we're reading in an Excel spreadsheet that we want to then publish out to the public. But at the moment, it includes a whole bunch of personal information. So we've got information there that's kind of corporate information around what we might do from a business perspective. But there's also some personal information in there. All the personal information here is totally fake. So we've just made fake information we're going to redact for the purposes of the exercise. But you can see we might have things like usernames, cell phone details, obviously people's location, their address and things as part of that. All of that information is stuff that we want to get rid of. So we can validate the data here. We can remove those fields. We can group some of that information in. Some of it might be very operational terminology, so that we want to actually make that a little bit more public friendly, redact some of the dates to make it not a specific day, but down to month and year and things as we go through. And then obviously we can change that into a public format. We can put that into a particular feature writer structure. Here we can output that data set, and then we can obviously post that up to SharePoint. So in this point here, we've now redacted our data, we've cleansed it down, we removed all the sensitive information. So what we're going to do is obviously write that to SharePoint, so that Excel file basically sits on SharePoint. But what we can do then at the end here is publish this into an approvals list. So we're using a SharePoint list here that basically puts the data in, we create a new record there, and therefore when you look on SharePoint, you'll see if we go to our open data's approvals list, we have a new record that basically needs to be approved as we run through. But what we've also used is Power Automate, so that we have an approval comes through that's triggered from that SharePoint list that says there's a new data set here. We've got the link there. Do you want to approve this for publication or not? So if you want to publish it, we can go click, we can review that data set, then we can come in, we can click on approve. But if I just come across here, this is that record. So we've got our return of service. We can see it's not been approved. So if I click on the approvals one, that's going to go through, and then that will update the status within my SharePoint list as being approved. And then what I can do is we can run another workspace that would check that, say nightly, and look for all of those workspaces that have been approved and can see that it's now been approved there. So it's kind of the inverse of obviously reading that data set. What we can do is we can have something here that reads that list, looks for the particular data sets we want to publish, and then we're using another Azure function, which is the blob storage, that lets us basically build out and put the data in to a blob within Microsoft Azure. And then we can email that link out to say this data is now basically available. And we can make these Azure storage links public, or we can keep them private. So it's just really cheap storage. It basically means you can store quite a lot of data for dollars. when it comes to it at the end of the day. So it's a really easy way of actually starting to make this information available. And again, we can send out an email link to say this is there and available. And once you've got that link, you can collect and actually start to access that data.
And Gavin, just that Power Automate, there was a question from John and a couple other people in the chat. Is that integration because we're integrating with the data, or do we have actual integration with Power Automate itself?
So we can do both. We've got integration with just the data there. The reason we've skipped around some of the integration with Power Automate is because all of the interesting functionality is basically you have to pay for with Power Automate, and we don't need it because we've got FME. So we can basically replace Power Automate with FME. But Power Automate has the ability to call FME through all the HTTP callers, and it can do all the webhooks. So we can pass information back and forth with those as well. So there are quite a lot of hooks there we can actually start to tie into that Power Automate if you've got the sort of premium tier of it. We're using the list just to get around having to actually jump up that additional tier.
Perfect. Thanks, Ciaran.
And then just lastly, with the blob storage, that was just essentially what we were using there. So this is back to that original exercise we were looking at the beginning where we're changing that report. But here, what we're doing is we're actually uploading it to the blob storage. So we can actually publish our HTML content, our report, straight to a web server effectively. So here we're basically building out a serverless web server. So rather than having to install a server, set IIS up, put all my code and stuff on there, I can literally just publish this to a particular bucket or a particular storage file and publish up my data. So this works really well for open data. It works really well for reporting or any other HTML content we want to build, especially with things like we were looking at or we'll look at with DCC later. And obviously then I can send a link out for that as well. So if I do need to publish my open data, I can push this up. In this case, I'm just publishing my HTML report. So you can see how we can generate public-facing web content really, really easily directly from FME without even having to actually worry about copying or moving this data around. It publishes it straight there. It's buckets with S3. So if you do this on Azure, it's buckets with AWS. With Azure, it's kind of these web folder structure as you come through. So that's just a public link published straight up. So there's a huge amount we can do there with Microsoft. We can do with the different Azure capabilities. It's a really rich product suite. Much as we love to hate Microsoft, it's very, very powerful. Azure these days is very, very powerful. There's an awful lot you can do with them now, and tying FME into that, especially with a lot more remote work and things over the last 18 months has been quite powerful.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Gavin. We all love Microsoft. It's just Gavin. That's all. Just to be clear from an IMGS perspective. No, that was great. And again, I think it really kind of showcases what's possible and how much interaction is there between FME. We do have a couple of other questions that come in, which I'm actually going to hold, if you don't mind, Andrew and Frank, until probably towards the end of the session, just because we're running a little bit over, and I want to hand over to Sean, Robert, and Andrew from Northern Ireland Water. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen if you guys want to step in. Brilliant. So, Sean, I don't know if you want to try share your screen or who's ever going to present.
You're on mute, Sean.
Good morning, and thanks for the opportunity to present. A couple of Gavin's slides particularly resonated with me. One with the little girl who says, sometimes I get confused, so I'm in that bracket. And the other one, the guy banging the head off the table, also in that bracket. And indeed with passwords, something we encountered recently as well, with writing data table. So there we go. Glad to see Gavin gets confused as well.
It's nice to know he's human, isn't it, Sean?
Right, so I'm assuming you can see our slides there, yeah?
We can indeed. Yes, just if you want to go into presenter mode.
Okay.
Bottom right-hand corner. Just before the zoom in and out, yeah.
Okay.
Brilliant.
Right, I'll fly through this. So I'm going to give a bit of brief business context and background to why we're using FME, and then Andrew and Robert will actually get into the technical detail and actually share some background on a couple of quite sophisticated workbenches they've created to solve business problems. And you will actually run those live and whatnot. So look, we're 3 guys in the asset information development team. There are others, and there's a wider family of asset information team in the NI Water. So that's us 3. Robert has just recently got his certified professional accreditation just last week, so he's happy as a pig in the proverbial about that, and so are we. And Andrew's on that pathway as well, so hopefully he'll be coming along next. So briefly, us guys are responsible for the Corporate Asset Register, or the QR as it's referred to in NI Water. And the Corporate Asset Register is really a logical database comprised of Oracle Spatial for geographic entities and ABB Ventex Ellipse, which is our asset management system. We manage those systems. We also use Azure as our JS platform. And FME really has become the 4th pillar of our key systems that us guys are responsible for, to deliver various solutions across the whole company, from customer services right through to asset management itself, and performing all sorts of analysis across the company. So the Corporate Asset Register has a huge footprint in the organization, and really has become quite fundamental to how we work, from the phone call coming in to getting the van out to the right place, to fixing the asset, recording details about it, monitoring performance, and then helping to deliver new capital interventions to repair and replace broken assets or assets that are underperforming, etc. So that's what we're about. NI Water, again, just briefly, we're the sole water and wastewater utility for Northern Ireland, serving circa 1.5 million customers across the country, with enough water mains and sewers to circumnavigate the globe if you wanted to do that. So that's just a few stats there on the sort of the key metrics in NI Water, what we do. Our business is fairly substantial. Recent plan, which is just kicked off. Like we're going to spend in the region of 4 billion over the next 7-year period, and there's a whole host of initiatives that are going to be put in place to help deliver the program of work and deliver the service that we need to over the next 7-year period. And indeed, in the graph in the bottom right, we have to deliver huge efficiencies. So a lot of what we do is all about making decisions, data-driven decisions, the correct data to help make those decisions. It's a huge part of the organization, and what we're about is trying to help people make the right decisions with the right data, integrating various systems, disparate data sources, bringing all of that together. So we've a significant role to play in helping deliver our actual business plan over the next 7 years. So the problems we have, like any other water utility or most business, we've had a massive investment in data acquisition, digitization, databases, systems, etc. over the last number of years, and that has worked very well in some parts of the business, not so well in other parts of the business. So, for example, us guys in the asset information team who organise GS, we're using Oracle Spatial and Azure to deliver that. We have spreadsheets, the spreadsheet jungle as we refer to it, right across the organisation. Everyone uses spreadsheets. The problem is that spreadsheet then starts to become a master repository of data. Say, for example, if a finance department might use Oracle Financials, etc. So lots of data across the business, lots of duplication, a lot of it inaccessible, hard to get to if you don't have the particular applications, silos, repetition, etc., which leads to a lot of redundant effort and huge inefficiencies in terms of data. So what we've been about over the last number of years is bringing that together using FME, integrating the data, integrating the applications, etc., validating the data, and providing more automated processes to help come to quicker and more streamlined decisions. And our portfolio of FME solutions has absolutely snowballed in the last number of years. Like go back to 1997, we only ever used FME to convert DXF maps into a map info format. And then probably about 5, 6, 7 years ago, we really sort of rediscovered FME again, and it has now become, as I say, the fourth pillar of what we do in the organisation. So it's hugely important to the operation. And indeed, most people who use FME in our organisation don't actually know they're using it. So we have actually embarked on a campaign recently internally just to spread the word about what we're using FME to do in their part of the business. And all of these parts of NI Water in our cloud map here are all using FME. It's a huge piece of work over the last couple of years with our finance team, building what we call the Flow Financial Logic of Water, which allows us to look at the cost of water production across the whole country. And indeed, FME is providing a vital role in that amongst our other Oracle and asset management systems as well. So as you can see there, there's quite a diverse group of people and departments within the company, everything from telemetry to our water and wastewater production lines, water quality, asset delivery, all using FME, probably the most of them without even realizing it. So apart from anything else, we have to make it clear that it is a vital role and try and, as I say, build that sort of corporate footprint across the business. Moving swiftly on, as we say quite often there, and sort of relating back to Gavin's presentations, what we say to people is, look, if you think there's a better way to do it and you're repeating the work and you're spending a lot of time, then there probably is a better way to do it, and you don't necessarily have to know what it is. Come to us with a business problem and we'll sort it out for you. We'll research it. We'll speak to IMGS or our FME partners and hopefully come up with a solution. And this is just some of the formats that we have been starting to use. As you can see there, the planned ones actually now are probably more than the current formats in use. Big drive towards 3D and building information model, and Ciaran Higgins and the asset information strategy team looking at that, and Point Cloud, etc. We've set up Intelligent Operations Center, looking at the Internet of Things, etc., etc. So we can only see the footprint escalating over the next number of years. Okay, again, I'm not going to call these out, but just to show the diversity of the sort of application we do. You know, I mentioned Flow Financial Logic of Water down here, just picking a few out randomly. New connections, that's our new water and sewer connections using FME there. To weekly whereabouts of where the contractors are working, situational awareness, just a whole raft of business solutions. And as we have been presenting that back to the company, people are starting to realize actually FME could do a job for me. And I think probably have some of our colleagues on the call today. So look, that's just a very brief background from me on sort of the business problems that we're trying to solve. And I'll hand over to Robert now, who will actually share a bit of his experience on a real business problem he had that has eliminated a lot of manual intervention for us. So that's me. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Just finish sharing screen now. Okay, so I'm just going to pick up the presentation here from where Sean had left off. 2 seconds, let's share the screen. Everyone seeing okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, I'm Robert McGregor. I've been a senior asset data analyst in Northern Ireland Water for coming on 15 years, using FME probably for the majority of those 15 years, and as Sean alluded to, probably using it properly for maybe about 6 or 7 years. As we said, we only used to convert data with it, but now we do so much more. So one of the solutions that I'm going to take you through here is our data request self-service solution that we developed in-house just last year. So a bit of the problem in the background of this, asset information, we deal with around 150 to 200 requests for GIS data per annum. So this is for contractors who are completing capital works, consultants who are working on analytic products, needing projects, needing copies of our data to forward those projects. Adding a lot of resource for our team. The ones who are doing it are the skilled asset information analysts. when you want to try and better utilize the skill sets of people and put their skills to better use. These requests taking maybe about 30 to 60 minutes per request, depending on the size of it, and a turnaround time of about 15 days from when we received the request until it would be actioned. So that was obviously causing a delay in supplying data. The contractors can delay delivery times for infrastructure and capital investments. And it was also disruptive to us in periods where volume of requests increased. Sort of recently, our PC21 program work kicking off, we were inundated. Luckily, we had this tool up and on before that came along. So our customers in this they're internal mostly. We have our EP project managers, our modeling teams. Ourselves and Asset Information would actually use this solution as well for the occasional data request that we do. And then the customer at the end is the appointed contractor, and they're the ones who are probably really reaping the benefits of this solution. So technology is deployed on it. FME is at the core of it, doing all the heavy lifting, doing all the good stuff that's making it working. We have Resident Enterprise, Oracle Spatial, SharePoint Online, and Outlook. And the outcome of this is that we've implemented self-service capability for Northern Ireland Water PMs internally to request data. We have the automated notification and approval process for that, minimize the turnaround time, automated uploads, and a full repository an audit trail of the data. So just a brief overview of the conceptual overview of it. I will go into a little bit of detail on workbenches. I'm going to jump between that and the live demo. So for the front end, our JS Enterprise, Oracle Spatial storing the requests and actually also initiating the workbench, which we feel is a little bit unique, but it may not be. Maybe some other people are doing it, but it's sort of the key thing to getting that turnaround time down. FME then reading our published data repository, sending some emails out for approvals and notifications, and then using SharePoint Online to distribute the data. Unfortunately, we're not using those good SharePoint connectors that Gavin showed because we're a couple of versions behind on our FME server, but we're looking to remedy that, and we'll obviously be moving to the SharePoint connectors whenever that time comes. So next up is the live demo. So what I'm going to do, shouldn't take too long. I'm going to jump between the slides in and out of actually going through a request here. So I'm going to jump out onto our CartoMap application, and I'm just going to create a request polygon here. So we go in using the Esri web app specifically for data requests, identify the area that we want the data for, and then fill in some details. So I'm just going to put my own email address in as the PM in this case. Requesting consultant, I'm just going to use our test consultant account. The recipient of the data's email, again, I'm going to use myself. Project title, FME demo. Project ref, FME, and I'm going to include water data, sewer data, LPS data. I'm not going to include these last two just for processing time because it can take maybe about 10 minutes to process whenever you do include those. And then the GS file format that we want. So map info is by far still our most popular, even though we are on the Azure platform. So then from there, I simply just save that, and that's my request made. Nothing else needs to be done. So what's happening here in the background then is we have an Oracle insert trigger on that table, which is whenever a record gets inserted, it's actually using the Oracle HTTP caller to execute an FME workbench on FME server via job submitter. So it's sending the object ID for what I just created, logging on with a token, and then it's actually kicking off an approval process. So it reads the polygon. We look at who's requested it against our data sharing agreement database. If it's already has a data sharing agreement in place, we send it down this route and we kick off the processing. If it hasn't got a data sharing agreement in place, then we see where it needs to go for that approval. So hopefully, in terms of my live demo, I should have in my personal email account an email showing that yes, these are the data sets are requested. We've got your request. Please wait for further information to say when it's being completed. So as an administrator, then we also get an email to say that AID test have made this request, but in this occasion, no valid DSA was found. So what we can do here, we can view the request. We have email links generated from the email using HTML that'll take whoever's approving this to the polygon that the other users created. We can have a look at it, say, yeah, that looks sensible. And then here we can either approve or reject. And again, this is using, you can just see the HTML there. We're sending an action as a parameter to an FME server job and logging on with a token to either approve or reject that. So in this case, I'm going to approve and jump back into the presentation. So this is just showing how we generated those emails and the links for approve and reject within that. Our next, so this is whenever we hit that approve, the approval process kicks off, takes that approve parameter. We do a little test and says, well, if it's approved, send the job for processing. If it's rejected, send out an email informing the requester or the PM that's been rejected and to get in touch just to explain why it's been rejected, and then writing that status back to the Polygon table. So that is kicking off the processing, which is happening at the minute. We take that Polygon, we do a little bit of status management on it, just looking for duplicates and such. We determine the MBR of that Polygon, because that's then used later to when we're reading our data to ensure that we're keeping our read times down and really getting the most efficient processing that we can. We run a test to see what types of data are requested, so we went for the water, sewer, and LPS. And then we kick off a series of FME server jobs based on each of the data themes that will run individually, be queued on FME server. We initiate the notification processes this as well as queues in behind the processing jobs, and we'll send out notifications based on whether they were successful or not. So the actual data extraction itself then, this is the example for, I think, our wastewater model data. We use the MBR parameters, the min-x, min-y, max-x, max-y, to ensure that we only read a search envelope for all of these data sets. We expose the FME dataset attribute within this to ensure that we can get the file name out. That's allowed us then to push everything into one centralized clipper and then extrapolate on that dataset name in this attribute filter here, and then put them into the individual writers after that. That was just sort of done to keep everything nice and tidy, a nice compact workbench, so that we didn't have multiple clippers, and it was sort of making it easy to see and to read. So I'm then going to come back out to, sorry, no, I'm not just going to the notifications at this stage. Apologies. Yeah, so once the process has taken place, we run a notifications workbench which generates download links if it's been successful. If it hasn't been successful, you get a notification to say that something's failed and they investigate, and then we initiate the upload. This is just done through a script with a system caller. As I said, we don't have the SharePoint connectors there yet in the version that we're using. So hopefully then I should go back to my email, and I should find that my NI water data is ready for download. So this is the link that we generated to go to SharePoint, and I've received this as a recipient of the data. We redirect in, we sign in to SharePoint, and you can see 3 minutes ago this data came through, our LPS or water and our sewer data. I'm not going to show you the data, you'll just go in and you can see there's all the different data sets within that request area. That is a very whirlwind tour of that, and I'm just going to finish on that slide. I never had any, I knew it was going to work with FME. It was more whether many people were hitting it on the server or not. So I'm going to pass over to Andrew now on that.
Great, thank you, Robert. So I'm just going to share up the slide deck here again. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to cover quickly the solution that was developed for major incident reporting. The big problem in NI Water was that we needed to know what happened, where it happened, and who was affected when an incident happened. As a water utility, we do have quite a lot of different types of incidents with droughts. We have water quality issues. and we have things like that as well. And we really wanted to be able to adapt to an instant as it was happening. So in the past, we would have had lots of different data sets, and we wouldn't have been able to pull them all together. They came from lots of different places, and during an instant, you would have spent a lot of time manually cutting them. And by the time you'd got a picture of what the instant looked like, someone came along and said, well, actually, we've rezoned this area. Could you now tell me what this picture looks like? And that was the big issue. So what we developed was a one-click routine where during an instant, someone identified what asset was affected. We plugged that asset into the routine, and it output a list of all the different customers and the areas and things, all the information that would be needed during a major incident. The solution uses Oracle Spatial for some of the key data sets from the corporate asset register, FME for the processing, ArcGIS Enterprise for the front end, really to show people what's happening. So a quick diagram of how this looks. We have a number of different readers. So some of these data sets, we don't actually have a link into the master source. So they're stored in file geodatabases. They could be stored in spreadsheets, and there is some data in SQL Server as well. We also have data in Oracle Spatial for pointer DMAs, which are the district metered areas, the supply areas, and for some of our key customers. And then we write this data out to an ArcGIS portal writer so that people during an instant can see this on a dashboard, and that desktop analysis users can read the hosted feature layer quickly in the ArcGIS Pro for analysis. Flat file out to Excel as well, so that other systems can consume that data too. A conceptual diagram then of the key data set that pins this all together. So in this diagram, we have water treatment works at the center, and that water treatment works then links into service reservoirs, which are large tanks that store clean water around the country. And then we have a connection between those service reservoirs to the properties that are served by them in different supply areas. And at the bottom here, we have a table showing all the links that we have manually gathered together to let us know what water treatment work serves which reservoir, serves which supply area. And the key here really is that data is maintained. If that data wasn't maintained, then during an instant, we would be given completely the wrong answers. So I'm going to jump into a live demo here quickly. Oh, sorry. Share screen. So a type of incident we might have is we have a water quality issue at a water treatment works. Can you tell me who's affected? This is the workbench here. Oh, yeah, you can see it okay. And I hit play. And I'll just let that run away in the background. Just to show you as well, we have a dashboard. So on this dashboard at the minute, you can see there's nothing there. And once this workbench runs, you'll be able to see what the instant looks like and what the figures are for all these different key customers. Okay. So just to go back to the script or the PowerPoint. So in the workbench then, with a number of readers, like I said, with file geodatabase readers, and the way to link these together, we do point and polygon analysis over for a number of these data sets. We also link some of these with the car ID. So if we know the asset ID, we're able to identify the customers linked to that particular asset. And the engine room is this purple area here, which calculates the instant area. So we know the area that we want, and we can also exclude part of a supply area from that as well. So this really identifies the area and the key asset IDs. And one thing that I've learned from previous FME tours actually was really to do as much of the transforming as close to the system of source as possible. So I've highlighted in the slide here a number of the SQL creators and SQL executors. So Oracle Spatial is doing a lot of the heavy lifting here and putting that back out into the workbench. And another thing that I'd noted as well was when working with hosted feature layers, I did initially have issues getting large polygon data sets to write to ArcGIS portal. And one thing I found that really helped was to reduce the number of features per request that you're putting through the hosted feature writer. And then that works well for you. Okay, so I'll jump back to the workbench or to the, just refresh this. Hopefully this is run. Yep, so we now have, at the touch of a button, we now have the instant area for an instant at Bleak Water Treatment Works. We know how many properties are affected. We know how many of our customer care properties are within that area, and how many schools and nursing homes and so on. So there obviously aren't any in that particular zone. So very quickly, we can tell that the instant rooms, well, here's what your scenario looks like. And we can also save that scenario and then adapt as things change. We're also able to ArcGIS flow. So this is an example where we had to deliver bottled water to people. And we're able to bring in the customers and then develop routes. Just back to the presentation. Yep, so as is shown there, the instant visualization, been able to deliver bottled route analysis for customer care properties. And one of the big key things as well, we have now have one version of the truth. So whenever the dust settles in an instant, there's always a lot of reporting to be done by our environmental teams, by our operations teams to identify, well, who was interrupted when, and to provide information to the drinking water inspectorate. So they can use this information at the end of an instant to really generate all of their reports. And it means that all of the reports, the figures all match, because in the past, you may have had bits of lists from different sources and you know, the numbers just didn't add up. Now we have one single source of the truth, and it really has benefited Northern Ireland Water. Okay, I'll just hand over to Sean then.
Yeah, well, effectively, Andrew, that concludes our presentation, which hopefully highlighted the really fundamental role that FME plays within NI Water today, and it's all about efficiencies, consistencies, trying to weed out repetition and duplication of effort and whatnot, and having reliable workflows. So it really is important to NI Water, and to say the escalation or the proliferation of solutions across the company just, I guess, is the evidence of that. So have you any questions for anyone, fire away, or if you're happy that you've seen all you need to, that's also fine. So that's us.
Thanks, Sean. Really, really appreciate that. And great, Robert, for a live demo, for it to work. Well done on that. You know yourself, it can be quite scary. Andrew, yourself as well. So some really, really amazing stuff there. Really, really appreciate it. And yeah, it just goes to show, I suppose, the breadth of how FME can be applied across the organization. So your enterprise, which is brilliant. I specifically like the way that you're kind of taking that feed and putting it into an organizational dashboard to show who's affected in particular areas and stuff like that. That was really, really clever. And again, Andrew, as you said, in a couple of seconds or a minute or so, it's all refreshed, and again to report then afterwards. Very clever. I just had one question, Robert. When I was looking at it, when you're drawing the polygon, obviously it was quite a large polygon. Do you have any restrictions in there to stop a project manager putting a polygon around Northern Ireland and hit and run?
Yes, we do. So that was part of when I was saying the status management. There's a little bit in there. It gets an automatic rejection if it goes to too large an area. Yeah. But there's some substantial ones I've went through, and we've stress tested it. So we've got it as large as we can hope for. It'll do half a county. Wow. And it will. It'll take a while longer, but it certainly won't fail. But that's sort of where we're comfortable at, because it's more from a process point of view, where if someone needs that amount of data, there's probably a better way for them to get it, like potentially setting up a web service for them or giving them a full cut what we're trying to do with the smaller ones is ensure that people working in small areas are always coming back for the most recent data whenever they need it.
No, that's brilliant. And then just one last question, because I know we're a little bit over. Is there a kind of bit of an audit log in the background as well, kind of just monitoring who's downloading what and when, or?
Yeah, so everything's sort of stored in in the table within the there's editor tracking on the Azure editor tracking's on there. That allows us to keep a record of who's requesting what and where it's going to. So it's certainly that was another part of it that all used to be manual as well. We used to have to log the job manually and everything. So like it's just like it really has improved the process no end.
Yeah, no, it sounds amazing. Kind of reminds me a bit of ENET presented a couple of years ago on a similar kind of click before you dig solution that they did, and like that, it was, I think, 6 people spending roughly about 8 hours a week just doing all these manual paper requests, and now it's completely automated. So again, just in terms of letting you and obviously and Andrew and the rest of the team be able to self-serve information, but also automating it again is key. So no, that's brilliant. Again, Sean, Robert, Andrew, I really appreciate it. Thank you for presenting. Really interesting presentation. And if anybody thinks of any questions later on, we'll forward them on to you and you can kind of go back to them. I'm going to hand over to Ciaran, who's going to give a really quick spin through his presentation, just to let people kind of grab a bite to eat and everything like that as we go along.
I've got 2 minutes, haven't I?
You've got 2 minutes, yeah. It was Gavin's fault. That's who I'm going to blame.
I just wanted to say, before we kick off, is really well done to the NI Water when we see the slide of all the processes that NI Water created, and actually created with very little support from ourselves, like a really self-sufficient team. It just shows what can be done. And congratulations to Robert on his certification, and no pressure, Andrew. Robert got a 3-year certification, so we'll be watching out to see now what you get now, you know.
5.
5, yeah. I think 3 is top. I think 3 is only 3 is good to get. So no, fantastic, guys. I really appreciate it. And thanks again for speaking this morning. So I'm going to speak very quickly, very quickly, about data quality. So, and again, is that sharing, guys? Yeah, you can see that?
Yeah, Ciaran, that's up on screen.
Okay. So really just want to talk about data quality this morning. Very much taking on a lot of the topics that Don covered in his early presentation, and actually showing how FME is more than just spatial data quality. That actually it can be used to actually improve your organization quality. And what we're seeing is, as Laurie just beeps in here, what we're seeing is that poor data quality is hindering digital transformation. 60% of organizations believe they're behind in their digital transformation. 47% of organizations have data integrity issues. So again, when Don was talking about data veracity, you know, talking about data quality issues being a hindering what they're trying to do from a digital transformation point of view. And 55% of a company's data is not accessible. In this presentation, I'm going to focus on how FME can actually meet those data integrity issues. And in my last presentation later on this morning, I'll talk about how we can actually improve the accessibility of data in the data democracy presentation or data sharing presentation. So the Gavin gave me this. Always good for Dilbert. Joke, the use of the database is wrong, the data is wrong, and what we use the other data, we can use the two of them and multiply them together. We're even going to get even worse data. Bad data costs money, you know, and I think it's actually Sean and NI Water has always said to me over the years, people come with great ideas of smart networks and smart everything, but actually if you don't have the data, you know, where do you go? And that is fundamental. And if the data is not good, you've got big problems. So solving data quality issues with FME, you know, we need to look at 3 things. And again, Don touched on this morning. Data health. Where are the data issues, and can we produce data quality reports so that we can measure data health and actually know where we're supposed to be? The next step then is being able to fix the data, so having automatic corrections, but actually taking that a step forward, because no matter how clever we are with the technologies in FME, from machine learning to AI, we can't fix every issue automatically. So you need the concept of a data steward. And we've seen this morning through Gavin's presentations and some of Don's, with data, with server apps now, you can provide people the ability to update and correct data in a very easy to use manner. And what we're trying to get to is a single source of truth. And you can see that again in the NI Water presentation about the Oracle Spatial being that single source of truth. And then what you want to be going forward is being able to monitor it, to have data quality as a team sport with continuous checks and alerts. So in the data health check areas, where can FME help you? It can help with spatial data. And we've seen that over the years, these World Tour events. So I won't go into too much into that. But also it has non-spatial capabilities to check attribution, to check the total size of your data. And also now, as Don mentioned, it snuck in this year, we've got the abilities to check schemas as well. So from an attribute point of view, we've got the attribute validator. You know, a very simple way to make sure that the attribution in your database is correct and following the correct basic rules. We have the null attribute mapper. You know, null data is no use. How do we find these nulls? How do we pick them out and get them corrected? And also then we've duplicates. You know, in any data warehouse, any reporting system, duplicates provide bad data. So you need to clean out that data so that you have that single source of truth. And we also have the ability to generate statistics about your information. Like if the record counts and the attribute counts don't match, then there's something wrong. There's either too much data or too little data. And as we're saying here, with the schema mapping, we can also look at two different schemas and data sets and check to see how they are and how they're mapping together. And as we quickly mentioned, now we have the schema scanner, which is very brand new, but actually will probably be a bit more mature next year in the 2022 release. So you can actually check schemas and see how they're looking and look through the data. With the data quality fix, you know, with FME, as the guys talked about, you know, being able to change data at source. FME is over 400 connectors. Also being able to change data as it goes to the data warehouse or the data mart. So as you're putting data into your reporting system, whether it's as big as a Snowflake or a Redshift data warehouse, or if it's just a a Tableau file or a SQL table for Power BI, or as the guys were showing, pushing that data into a geodatabase or into an Esri, you know, dashboard or report. Being able to fix that data as it's going through, and also being able to fix the data at source. And as again, we talked about already this morning, being able to provide a complete audit trail of all corrections and reports. I really think the idea of a data steward FME app is where we can go. It's so easy to do. Gavin has shown this morning how quick and easy it is to create these apps. So for data that cannot be automatically corrected, we can pass the data anomalies to the users to resolve by the app. Whether that's to say, look at, is this asset type X or type Y? Pick one. Or actually the address is wrong. Can you pick the right address? Or can you correct whatever it is? You get it to the business user. They can be picking it up on their phone, on their PC, wherever it is, and they can also then be alerted in things like Teams, Slack. So you're bringing the data to where they are, so that they can resolve really easily. And also then what you really want going forward is being able to monitor data health. So being able to use FME to create regular reports. And then we've seen the kind of reporting tools we have. And I'm going to lose time here, I think. So the summary is data quality is a huge challenge for every organization. FME provides a cost-effective platform to build data quality. And by focusing on data quality, you can begin to deliver on the promise of digital transformation. So you can see FME has all the tools, not just spatial, to build data quality into your workflows and to then deliver real digital transformation when you have good data. That was 5 minutes. I think that was pretty good going.
Thanks, Ciaran. I know you put out quite a lot there, and so yeah, no, really appreciate it. Thanks, and guys, apologies that we're overrunning today, but obviously we obviously had that great session from Don that kind of ran over a little bit, and it was great to have him. And then, as we all know, Gavin always runs over because that's just Gavin. So that puts me nicely into Ciaran. If you want to stop sharing, is session 3. So we'll move over to session 3 now, and actually just bam. So just as a really gentle reminder, Session 3, so that will be Gavin and myself. Mainly Gavin's talking about managing and migrating data on the ArcGIS with ArcGIS Online. Then we'll have Vinny or Vincent from Dublin City Council and Gavin talking about that digital transformation. And then data democratization. I just keep on pronouncing it incorrectly. I've tried it about 1,000 times. So data sharing is what I changed it to, but I forgot to change it here. Ciaran making fun of me all week because he's supportive like that. So if we just jump over to that session, and looking forward to seeing us all there. And again, just a quick shout out to Sean, Robert and Andrew again for that amazing presentation. Really, really appreciate it today.